So today I would be covering briefly on how the fuel is burnt in the reactor and then it is discharged and what you have to manage in the core and out of the core. Just as always, I give a recap of the last lecture. I hope you have downloaded the notes of this lecture 5 also, or it may be available today. We saw about the classification of reactors with respect to the neutron spectrum, whether they were thermal or whether they were fast or whether they were depending upon the coolant or moderator, whether they were light water cooled or heavy water cooled or graphite cooled or moderated and so on. So then we discussed what is the role of the neutron spectrum, how thermal is a thermal reactor, what is the ratio of the epithermal neutrons to the thermal neutrons. In a PHWR, for example, you have more number of neutrons, which is less in the thermal energy range, whereas in a fast reactor, you will have more in the fast energy range. With all this background, I went on to discuss about the different reactors which are built in India. First was the research reactors. Then we saw the uses of the research reactors. For example, like material testing, fuel irradiation, or isotope production. Then we went on to discuss the power reactors. The workhorse of the power reactors in India is the pressurized heavy water system. I told you about the figure of 8 loop, the pressurized heavy water system, and the natural uranium fuel, its burn up, and all these aspects. The design features of most of the reactors were covered, whether it's a pressurized heavy water reactor or pressurized water reactor or the BWR, boiling water reactors. Then we saw some of the fuel depletion aspects and some operational features. So today, I would like to introduce you to the India's three-stage energy program, three-stage program, which you must have heard so many places, and you must have looked into the net also for information, and how our nuclear fuel cycle is going to be geared up for this three-stage program, and what are the fissile requirements which are required at the different stages, and why we have to reprocess the fuel in order to be efficient or in order to be self-sustenance in the fuel for the Indian fuel nuclear program, and how the fissile isotope build up during irradiation in the reactor, and how this fuel management is done. We have to do fuel management, I have already told you, in order to keep the reactivity or in order to maintain the balance. Then some sort of actinide separation, which I was try to touch upon. And finally, I would just give two brief concepts I would present on thorium utilization. One is the advanced heavy water reactor, which we are building, only the physics concepts and only briefly, and the molten salt breeder reactor, which could be the reactor for the future, and it has some interesting concepts. So that is why I would like to introduce these two reactors. First, let us look at the fuel cycle. See, for example, if you have an ore, you need to fabricate the fuel. Then the fuel goes from the uranium mines and mining and milling. It gets converted to uranium hexafluoride. Then you goes to the enrichment plant where it gets enriched, or even if it is natural uranium oxide. Then you go to the light water reactors or power reactors, light water or heavy water, and then after the fuel is utilized in these reactors, it is discharged, and after it is discharged, it is reprocessed. I told you all the useful materials are extracted from the discharged fuel, and rest of the materials are safely disposed after all the radioactivity has died down, and it is in a federal waste repository. So this is the entire fuel cycle which is followed. Some countries do reprocessing, some countries don't do reprocessing. But in India, we believe in extracting every single fissile atom or fissile content in the fuel. And that is why we believe in reprocessing. And our three-stage program is also dependent on reprocessing, is formulated on the basis of reprocessing. I would like to dwell on this slide for a little time because this gives basically the Indian nuclear power program. First of all, we started with some proven technology. On a turnkey basis, we went in for the CANDU type of reactor because from our natural resources point of view, we had a lot of natural uranium, and our natural uranium was not of very good quality. So if we have to enrich it, we would be spending more energy in enriching that fuel. So we decided, India decided to go in for natural uranium, and I have already told you it can become critical only with the heavy water. So we went in for the natural uranium system and heavy water moderator and cooled. So that is why we said that we would go for pressurized heavy water reactors of the CANDU type. And this is a proven technology there. And we have adapted it, and we have also changed a lot of designs from the Narora version, Narora reactors and so on. Today there are 18 operating reactors. One more has joined the club, which is a higher version of 700 megawatt. The total uranium in our country, we have a potential of about producing 10,000 megawatt electricity. That means a few more reactors can be built. Otherwise, we'll have to find in more and more uranium reserves from the ores in the different parts of the country. Apart from this, in the first stage, we have some LWRs also operating. 2 boiling water reactors was again was developed on the turnkey basis from General Electric USA, and 2 more VVERs, that is the pressurized water reactor type, which I had told you from Russia. We have got this, and this is, they are operating very well. 2 units are operating, and 3 and 4 are in advanced stages of construction. And one more reactor, which is a 700 megawatt reactor, is commissioned and is connected to the grid, which is pressurized heavy water. In pressurized heavy water reactor, we started with the 220 version. We went on to 540, and now we are in the larger power reactor, which is the 700 megawatt reactor. And the second stage, what India decided was, you operate the pressurized heavy water reactors. After the discharge of the fuel, you reprocess the fuel which has come out of this, because it would have plutonium, and use that plutonium along with uranium in a fast breeder reactor. Thereby, because it's a breeder, you will breed more fissile material. Thereby, you will be increasing the potential of whatever was available in the form of natural uranium. You will be increasing it many, many, many fold. So that is why the breeder reactors are important. With this in view, we made a small test reactor, fast breeder test reactor, which was operating since 1985. It proved the technological objectives of the fast breeder reactor, and it is still, we are doing some tests here. The 500 megawatt prototype fast breeder reactor is soon to be commissioned. It's in a very advanced stage of commissioning. So the stage 2 has a lot of potential. These numbers are calculated and revised and again, but still, because of the 18 to 19 reactors are operating, and the plutonium from this reactor the reprocessing technology has been very, very well established. So already we have got the plutonium required for the first commission, to commission the first reactor, which has already been fueled, and the reactor is ready to be started at any time. So this is where the reprocessing is important. The plutonium from this stage goes into the second stage, which is the fast breeder reactor. In my next slide, I'll explain it a little more with respect to materials, but here I'm just telling you the basic philosophy. In the third stage, what Bhabha had decided was, or we should have thorium-based reactors. So because India is endowed with a lot of thorium reserves, so you should have thorium, but you already know that thorium is only a fertile material. It would require a fissile material. So we require fissile materials from these with thorium. But suppose we put thorium in a self-sustaining design, then what happens is whatever uranium-233 which is being produced in this will go back into this reactor. So you actually have only thorium from outside, and uranium will keep on coming from the same reactor. You have basically power or nuclear energy for all time. That is the concept. It is a very, very well established and very unique concept which our country has been following. To this end, two reactors have been designed. That's what I had told you. One is the advanced heavy water reactor, which is under development, and the molten salt breeder reactor, which is under conceptual stage. So the power potential in this stage is very, very, very large. Now, looking at the material aspects, we have two types of the different stages of the Indian nuclear power program. You say that we started with natural uranium. We put it in uranium fuel pressurized heavy water reactors. This has about a 300 gigawatt electric year capacity. Let's forget about all these things. But from here we get the depleted uranium. I have already mentioned to you that you start with 0.71% natural uranium, uranium-235, which depletes to around 0.2% or so. So the depleted uranium also you get from here, and the plutonium also you get from here. These both go into the fast reactor, and fast reactor can use a thorium blanket surrounding the core. This blanket will start breeding U-233, and the plutonium which is discharged from can have the potential to go back into the same reactor, and the uranium-233 which is coming out of this stage can go to fuel the third stage reactor. So basically, if you have so many fast breeders running, you would have enough uranium-233 to combine it with thorium to run a reactor in the third stage based on U-233 fuel. So this is called as the power generation, which is primarily by the PHWRs or whatever natural resources we have in our country. And this is the expanding the power program by building the uranium-233 inventory, or this is called as the breeder stage. And this is the thorium utilization or a sustainable power stage. So that is how our nuclear power program was formulated. This is another way of looking into it and looking at it with some examples which is given here. We have this IRE, which is mainly making the fuel, converting the ore to the fuel. This you will be covered in your nuclear fuel lectures, but I'm just giving you the various agencies of Department of Atomic Energy which are involved. This is a Nuclear Fuel Corporation which takes the converted material from here and makes it to fuel. Either it's a uranium fuel or thorium fuel, and this is the pressurized heavy water reactor. There is another Uranium Corporation of India also, which is gearing up and giving the uranium necessary. And you have this fuel reprocessing plants which take the uranium and plutonium from these reactors, and the waste is immobilized, waste immobilization plant, and it goes to the repository, and the useful uranium and plutonium can go into any type of reactors. Here I've given advanced heavy water reactor as an example. The plutonium goes into the fast reactors. So this requires advanced fuel fabrication plants, because you have to use uranium and plutonium. They may be radioactive, and then you have to mix it along with other oxides to form oxides or carbides, which are being used in different types of reactors. And finally, in the third stage, what I call this as a third stage is, we would like to take uranium-233 from these advanced fuel fabrication plants and thorium from whatever ores we are having, and make a thorium uranium-233 fuel reactor, and thereby the U-233 which is coming out of this reactor can go back to this reactor, and only thorium is required as an external input which are already having in our country. So this, if you make a reactor in a self-sustaining mode, you would have energy, nuclear energy or thorium-based reactors for all time. Now I would like to talk something generally about general principles of reactor design and some guiding principles. The broad guiding principles are basically power generation, fuel utilization, safety, and economics. So with this in view, what we have to do is that we have to first try to have choice of fuel, which fuel you want to use, whether it is natural uranium, whether it is enriched uranium, or whether it is thorium. Then we choose this neutron spectrum. What is a moderator? What is a coolant? Whether we want a light water based reactor or a heavy water based reactor or molten salt reactor or different types, like fast breeder reactor has sodium as liquid sodium as a coolant. So this neutron spectrum, when you're choosing, automatically your moderator and coolant gets fixed. And then we have to design the control system. We need to protect this reactor. We need to control the chain reaction. So thereby we have this control rods and we have to effective shutdown. So we have to use different control materials which have good absorption cross section and see which is able to control the reactor for which type of reactor. For example, cadmium cannot be used in a higher energy temperatures. We have to use boron carbide. Cadmium can be used in thermal reactors like PHWR, but PWRs and fast reactors use boron carbide. So these kind of materials has to be chosen and to design the control system. And also how fast it should be, it depends upon again the neutronic parameters like the delayed neutron fraction, which I was talking about. Fast reactors have to be controlled more efficiently because the delayed neutron fraction is small, and so your neutron lifetime is going to be small. Whereas thermal reactors, the neutron lifetime is larger. The beta fraction, which is the delayed neutron fraction, is also larger, so the control can be a little more sluggish. Or basically, you have to decide the speeds of the control based upon the neutronic properties. Also, we have to estimate the safety parameters. We need to know how much of excess reactivity to build in, depending upon our cycle length or the duration of the fuel cycle. And also calculate the safety margins at every stage of the reactor. I'll come to this a little later. And about fuel management, I told you whenever your K is less than 1, you have to refuel the reactor. So this fuel management is very much important, and how you are going to refuel the reactor is also very important because we have to follow the principles of power shaping or flux shaping. So we have to study the refueling options, which is also part of the reactor design. And shielding, which is the radioactivity release calculations, also we have to do. I am only just giving you a broad perspective only with respect to reactor physics in mind. But there is many things more in the reactor design, and there are so many agencies or so many different types of which are required for a reactor design. First, let us talk about the choice of fuel. When I'm talking about choice of fuel, I have already repeated so many times that we require what is called as eta is the governing factor. Here I have given you in thermal and fast spectrum for the 3 important fissile nuclides, which is uranium-233, uranium-235, and plutonium-239. You can see in a thermal spectrum, U-233 has maximum eta. This is the eta I have plotted as a function of energy. The blue curve is uranium-233, which is almost constant over all the energy ranges. The red curve is the plutonium-239, which seems to be better performing in the fast energy regions. And uranium-235 is better for the thermal spectrum. So you can see that eta is equal to 2, is around 2.077, and plutonium-239 in thermal is 2.1. I have already told you that eta minus 1, you require 1 neutron for continuing the chain reaction. Eta minus 1 can be perceived as the breeding potential of a fuel, and I have already told you it should be more than 2. So in fast reactors, you can see that you have to allow for some losses and all that. Of course, 2.8 is enough, and so that is why you can have a breeder fast reactor. Thermal breeder also you can have, but it's very challenging to have a thermal breeder because these will, in a Maxwellian average, when it is manifested in the reactor, it will be much lower because we have to consider all energies in the reactor. So this eta is a regenerative factor. This is the neutrons produced per neutron absorbed. So here I have talked with respect to thorium. Basically, you need an extra neutron for the conversion. This can be available if your eta is greater than 2. That is why you will have to design a reactors such that this is manifested, or you can have larger eta. Here, this is what I have reiterated, that eta minus 1 is considered as a breeding potential and a slightly harder heavy water spectrum. Harder means higher energy. In PHWRs, we have an average energy, I had already mentioned to you, of the order of 0.09 electron volts. So, but if you have slightly, if you go to about, let's say 1.5 EV or 2 EV, you get a better enhanced fuel utilization. So those things would be decided by the reactor design. That will be decided by your pitch or your enrichment and so many such factors. Now let us talk about some operating phases in the life of a reactor. We have designed the reactor, let us say. So first we have an initial phase. In the initial phase, we have the reactor startup and the initial core loading. After this, after some time, you would refuel the reactor. There is something called as an intermediate phase, which will be approached to equilibrium phase. This is called as a transition core sometimes. The fueling rate here will be more. Here is what is called as onset of fueling. So you start refueling from here. And here there is an equilibrium phase that is almost third phase of a life of the reactor. Again, this is a broad concept which I'm trying to give you. There could be many more phases like cold stage, hot stage, and so on. But right now I'm talking about the operational stages. The core is constant with respect to power distribution. What do you mean by equilibrium? What we mean by equilibrium is that the power distribution does not vary on a day-to-day basis. It's always kept constant. This is kept constant by a proper fuel management. So any reactor will be in this equilibrium phase for 95% of its life. I'm giving you some examples here. For a PHWR, for example, this phase lasts up to 140 full power days. That's about half a year. And the first refueling will start at 140 full power days. And this stage is around from 140 to 500 full. Here we refuel about 8 bundles per day or 1 channel per day. This is a transition phase. And after 500 full power days, the PHWR reaches equilibrium operation with respect to the power distribution. So you can say that after 500 full power days, your equilibrium phase is reached. But whereas in a PWR, the equation is a little different. We have a fuel cycle of about 18 months to 24 months in advanced PWRs. The core is partially replaced every 18 months. What is the meaning of fuel cycle? It means that the core is partially replaced in every 18 months. Either it's 1/3 of the core or 1/4 of the core or a number of fuel channels. The initial core lasts up to initial phase lasts up to 5 cycles. First core you have, then you have second core, third core, and so on. So there is a transition phase from about 5 to 8 cycles. So the equilibrium loading has come in fifth cycle, but up to 8th cycle, only after 8th cycle, it has reached actual equilibrium. So after 8 cycles, the equilibrium stage is reached. So 8 into 18, so many months would be there. But the power production is always going to be at 100% during all these stages. But only the refueling rate could be a little higher in the initial stages. And the this statement is not correct. I'll correct it and put it. The initial core is the first core. And from you have the second reload, third reload, and so on. Up to the 5th reload, you get the equilibrium loading, and equilibrium loading to around 8 cycles is called as a transition phase. And after 8 cycles, we have the equilibrium phase. So the PWR, the operational stages are a little different from a PHWR. This is just to give you a flavor of what happens in different types of reactors. Both are thermal reactors. And still they have in fast reactors also, it is a cycle length of 18 months are there, 180 days are there. So after 180 days, you will replace part of the core. Now, if I'm talking about a reactor physics simulation, suppose this is the core and you have these are all different fuel assemblies. Now, what we do is that we start with a fuel pincel. This is the assembly. Each assembly is going to have, say, 19 rod cluster here. I'm taking a PHWR. I homogenize this and make it into a homogenized lattice parameter base, which is based on flux and volume homogenization. and then I do a detailed 3-dimensional core analysis. So this is how the flux level varies in a cluster from the center of the cluster to the end. These are all the different types. This is just an example for you to understand. And I was talking about neutron spectrum. So here I'm talking about the this is the spectrum of the neutrons. For two different cases, I have put when two different coolant densities to be different. I just want you to appreciate that the spectrum is very dynamic and it changes the different conditions of the coolant or different operating pressures and so on. So your neutron spectrum will change. And this is just a typical plot of the new thermal flux at any mid-plane of the reactor. So this is how you will have here the control rods are there. So it has depressed and here the control rods are out and so on. So this is a typical flux distribution which we are required to evaluate. So this is a pin cell, the clad, this is the assembly level, this is a homogenized assembly, and this is the core. So these are the different stages in which we do the analysis. Now I was talking, after we do all these things, what we have to get is basically the reactivity as a function of burn-up or the operating stage of the reactor. So here I have plotted for PHWR. This is the reactivity as a function of time. So you can see the discharge burn-up is about 7,000 megawatt day per ton or so. Here the discharge burn-up, the K infinity is 1.045 or K effective will be less than 1. And thereby you have to refuel the reactor from this point. So some in a reactor, some bundles would be of higher burn-up and some bundles will be of lower burn-up. The average of the core would be around 7,000 megawatt day per ton. So this is the line which we saw, and we have to keep on monitoring this excess reactivity. In a BWR, also similar kind of things are there, but your x-axis you can see, because we are using enriched uranium, you go for longer days. So this is the kind of cycle length we go for 2 years, 1.5 years to 2 years as the refueling period. Now during this operation, how is this excess reactivity controlled? I told you, you always have to have K is equal to 1. How is it controlled? It is either controlled by the suppression. It is suppressed by the control rods, by inserting the control rods, or by and if I want to keep on increasing the K, then I'll have to add fuel. For example, in a PHWR, I have to add fuel after about 140 full power days. Or I use soluble boron moderator, which is used in PWRs, where boron is a neutron absorber. So it is suppressing, balancing your production and loss mechanisms. So when I'm slowly diluting the boron as the fuel operates, as the reactor operates, or the fuel depletes, then thereby the neutron absorption is balanced with the production. So there, at the end of the cycle, I will almost have no boron. I'm coming to the next code where this is for PWR. This is initially I use so much of boron to compensate the excess reactivity. I think you have understood. It is something like to do with the multiplication factor or fractional departure from criticality. To balance is being maintained with this much amount of boron in moderator. And this is how the cycle changes. And around 400 full power days, or let's say, you get almost 0 boron, which means this is the cycle length. After this, I will not be able to operate with this configuration. So I will have to refuel the reactor. That is what is meant by the cycle length. I have tried to show things pictorially here. This is a beginning of cycle. BOC means beginning of cycle. This is a typical schematic of a reactor. And the control rods are well inside the core, and it is balancing the production mechanisms, whereas this is the absorber, and this absorption is balanced by the production. Whereas at the end of life, the control rods have to be moved out to compensate for the loss in reactivity. So this is what I meant by movement of control rods. So it can be done in different ways. Here it is done in boron. Here it is done by the control absorber. So there are different ways in which to achieve the balance in the reactivity. Now I was talking something about the fissile requirement in thermal and fast reactors. How do you decide this? Again, it is on the basic neutronic parameters. I've just given an example of uranium-235 here. And if you look at the fission cross-section of uranium-235, plutonium, and U-233, I'm sorry, this graph is not very clear, but I think when you see it closely, you will understand. The blue curve is uranium-235. The brown one is plutonium. The brown one is U-233, and the green one is uranium-235. And the blue one is plutonium-239. So here you can see that there are differences in the fission cross-section. So I have to decide how to use these materials. Now I have two important parameters are nu and eta. We have seen this quite a lot in our lectures. In thermal spectrum, the nu is about 2.4 for uranium-235 and eta is about 2.07. Whereas in the fast spectrum, the nu is about 2.5. I'm sorry, I have not given eta, but I think it is there in my tables in my lecture 2. But what I want you to understand is the ratio of sigma 235, absorption of 235 to, that is uranium-238. This is the fissile to fertile captures. You can talk something like that, fissile to fertile. This is the amount of fissile, means production mechanism, and this is a loss mechanism. This ratio will determine how much of fuel is required. For example, if you look at the tables which I have given you earlier, and you see that 680 barns, the absorption cross-section of uranium-235, and for absorption cross-section of uranium-238 is 2.7 barns. If I divide by this, I get a ratio of 218, which means the production is much more dominating compared to capture. Whereas for the same uranium-235 in the fast spectrum, the ratio is only 7.84. What does this mean? This means that you will have to use a large amount of fuel in a fast reactor as compared to a thermal reactor. You would have to have higher enrichment in order to increase this production. So since the absorption ratio is lower in fast systems, one would require a higher enrichment, or one would require a larger number of fissile atoms, which means you will have to enrich it further. That is why you have 20% plutonium or 30% plutonium and 70% uranium. So this kind of combination is required. In my next slide, I have given you the inventories which are being used in different types of reactor systems. I've just taken some typical example. In a BWR, which is an advanced BWR, producing a power of 1330 megawatt electric. This I've taken from some literature. That is why I've given you these numbers. Enriched uranium oxide is a fuel. We use about 148 tons. Whereas in a PWR of similar capacity, you would require 100 tons of fuel. The enrichment, average enrichment here is 1.9, and the average enrichment in a PWR is 2.8. PHWRs you already know. We are using natural uranium fuel, so the uranium-235 content is 0.71, and the general 600 megawatt core contains 85 tons of natural uranium oxide. And the fissile feed, this is basically the fissile content. This is the average enrichment of the core, and this is the amount of fissile which is required to refuel the reactor. So this is about 2.6, and this is 3.3 in PWR. Here I have already told you the fast reactors use depleted uranium oxide plus plutonium. These are the different core inventories, about 7 tons in the core of uranium oxide and 23 in the 7 in the blanket, and 20% Pu plutonium oxide is being used. The fissile content in the core in tons, if you see, it is 2.81 tons here, that is just uranium-235 alone, and 2.82 tons here, and about 0.61 tons. Basically, I want you to understand that from the reactor design principles, depending upon the average absorption cross-section or the fission cross-section of the reactor in that particular spectrum, you will have to design the enrichments and the fissile inventory of the core. If you look at it a little more carefully, here I have tried to plot the irradiation behavior of the PHWR fuel as a function of what we call as burn up or irradiation or full power day of operation. Uranium-235 is depleting because it is producing energy, it is getting consumed. that plutonium is getting converted from uranium-238, so it is going to increase. So if you see at an average, the in-core burnup average is around half of the discharge burnup, which is around 3,500. Here you see at this point, half of the power will come from uranium-235 and 50% of the power will come from plutonium-239. So you still, when you're discharging the fuel, you are still having useful materials of uranium-235 is about 0.2% and plutonium is also about 0.2%. This is a power fraction, but basically the contents also would be same. So that is why it's good to reprocess this fuel to extract the useful materials from the discharged fuel. Similarly, for a PWR, that is pressurized water reactor, I have plotted, because it's an enriched uranium system, uranium is going to keep on falling, and plutonium is getting built up here, which is the blue curve. The uranium-238 is almost constant. Some of it is because it's getting converted to plutonium, and other fissile material, plutonium-41, is also being formed. So these are the different isotopics which happens during the irradiation in a reactor. Now, what do we do for a fuel management? See, when the basic principle again is maximize the energy output, increase the burnup, use the enrichment or multiple enrichment in a fuel assembly. I told you in a PWR, we have 3 to 4 different enrichments. The aim is to get a flat power distribution in the fuel assembly so that you can extract maximum power out of it. And also a flat or more or less flatter power distribution or a flux distribution in the entire core. So all this would have required to use effective fueling schemes. Here I have just given a schematic where the inner core is going to have a maximum discharge burn up because the flux distribution is going to be like this. And so that will be coming out first. And from the middle region, you can refuel the inner. So you can call it as reshuffling. And from this third region, outermost region, you can go to the middle region. So these two reshuffling is happening. Fresh fuel will be put in the outermost zone. So this is one type of refueling. There could be another type of refueling which is called as out to in to out. And there are different types of refueling. Some scattered loading is also possible. You have to decide which bundles have to be, which fuel assemblies have to be refueled. Basically what we have to minimize, the principle is maximize the energy output and minimize the external fissile feed requirement. Suppose we are putting plutonium as external feed, then we have to minimize it. So this requires optimizing of the loading patterns. Now I come to some of the 2 important reactors which I was talking to you as the third stage reactors, which is the thorium utilization in the Indian scenario. BRC is building an advanced heavy water reactor, which is a 300 megawatt boiling water reactor, boiling water cooled, heavy water moderated thorium fuel reactor. And these are all the other reactors which are being developed. I'll only talk about this MSBR and advanced heavy water reactor. So this is a typical layout of a reactor, how it looks like. And with respect to thoria, this is how thoria pellet looks like. I have already told you that we have made an AHWR critical facility where we are testing some of the thorium fuel so that we get confidence about the design of advanced heavy water reactor. And this is a typical molten salt breeder reactor where there is fuel is in the form of a liquid here and it is under circulation. Advanced heavy water reactor is a unique reactor which is being designed in India for a large-scale commercial thorium utilization. And we also wanted to prove the integral technological demonstration of the full thorium cycle. These are some of the design features. I'll not go into all these things. Basically, it's a takeoff from PHWR. So we have an evolutionary concept. We retain the merits of the PHWR, that we have a pressure tube type of a system and a bulk heavy water as a heat sink. And thorium is being used, which is for the first time we will be using. So it's an advanced fuel. So thorium is not fissile. It has to be mixed with some fissile element. In this case, we have mixed it with plutonium in the initial, and in the equilibrium, uranium-233 is already being produced. And there are some enhanced safety features which we have designed. So this is a typical layout of a core of AHWR. We have two distinct burn-up zones. This is a high burn-up zone and this is a low burn-up zone. There are different burn-up zones here also, but I'm just telling you it's called multi-zone so that we get the proper flux or power distribution. This is how the fuel cluster looks like in an AHWR. The inner pins are made of thorium plutonium and the outer pins are thorium uranium 233, and in the inner pins the uranium 233 will get depleted. In the inner pins it will, on the outer pins it will get produced, and so on. So this is how we are able to get self-sustained. The fuel cycle is based on self-sustaining. That is, uranium 233 should be produced. It cannot be produced elsewhere. It is not available in nature. So this reactor has to produce its own uranium 233. So this is the increase of the uranium in the outer pins, and this is the decrease in the inner pins. And thereby the net uranium, you can see that it is in the self-sustaining mode, or I get the same uranium 233 what we have put inside in this cluster after its irradiation period. And with respect to the molten salt breeder, what I was trying to talk to you about, we use a mixture of fluorides, lithium fluoride and thorium fluoride in some combination, and this is the core in which we will have the liquid fuel which is in the molten state, and this is the heat exchanger. A part of the core will come out and get reprocessed, or we'll wait for it to get reprocessed and put it back into the reactor. This is a long-term alternative to solid fuel reactor. There are several advantages. You can design a breeder in a thermal spectrum. It is an ideal design for, see, thorium, if you remember the properties what I was talking to you, uranium 233 is coming from the beta decay of protactinium 233. And this protactinium 233 has a half-life of 27 days. So suppose I take a fuel from this core and keep it outside the core for some required amount of time, all the Pa233 will get decayed to uranium 233 and it can be pumped back into the reactor. So you have a simple online processing. Just allow the protactinium to decay to uranium 233 and pump it back into the reactor. It sounds very simple, but it's very, very complicated design to achieve. It can be easily operated in the thorium U233 cycle. The structural materials have to be a little different because these are all, this molten salt fuel would be corrosive in nature. And so therefore we have to look in for different types of materials. And the breeding ratio, of course, can be improved by making this neutron spectrum as fast neutron spectrum. But there are different design options available. This is a small type of reactor system. Okay, so finally, I just would like to give you a glimpse of various types of designs which are available, the new designs, and you can see how complication. This was the first reactor which went critical 76 years ago. It's called the Chicago pilot. It was not having much. The graphite blocks were there and uranium rods were there, and there is this rod is controlling the rope was holding the control rod, and somebody was cutting off the rope here, and the reactor and the control rod was dropped into the reactor. So from this to some complicated designs, we have come a long way. We've got a lot of reactor experience with respect to design, operation, and safety. So this is a typical small modular reactor which many people are talking about now. I have just given you a picture of IRIS. And this is a research reactor, which is a Maple research reactor. And here you can see that we can have different irradiation assemblies to produce radioisotopes or to do material testing, increase the flux, to have higher thermal neutron flux so that the material properties can be studied. And then there are certain other concepts like the fuel could be in the form of a particle. These are all rodded fuel, but here this is particle. This is a pebble. Each pebble contains about 10,000 of 20,000 to 20,000 particles, and each particle is having something like this, which is of the micrometer of size, micrometer or nanometer size, and this is having 3 coatings. So these are called as trisoparticles. And these are being used in high temperature reactors. And this is like a tennis ball kind of thing, which is used in a pebble bed type of reactor. The pebbles are moving here, and some pebbles will be removed. And after its discharge, burn-up has been reached. And so this is a different kind of concept. So here there are different types of things, flavor of different types of reactors, which I have tried to introduce to you. An interested reader or interested student can go and see for many more things. And if anybody wants anything, you can please contact me. I have given you my address again, once again.